Good morning. Sorry, mic stand. Okay. Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuttapada Kamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavam Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathan Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadhutam Parijana Saritam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padhan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakanvitam Om Ajnanatirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadhamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Janmadyasya Yaton Vayati Taratas Charite Shvabhigya Swarat Tene Brahmaridhaya Radhikavaye Muyanti Yasurayah Tejo Varimridham Yata Vinimayo Yatra Trisargo Mrisha Dhamna Svena Sadha Narastokuhakam Satyam Param Dhimahi Hari Om Tat Sat. Okay, so Mahaprabhu had described so far 6 types of Atmaramas, and there was a 7th in that passage also that I actually meant to cover yesterday. I'm just going to gloss it now. The 7 types that Mahaprabhu discusses in that passage. Wait, where are we at here? The 7 are this. First, he describes in terms of the Gyan mark. First of all, that should be said, and then he gave them 2 categories. So the 7 types that are mentioned in that passage: the Sadhaka, the Brahmamai, the Prapti Brahmalai, and then there was the Mumukshu Jiva Mukta and Prapta Swarup, and then that's 6, and then there was a 7th called as Negranta Muni. So the word Muni was just defined as one who meditates on God. And the word Nagranta, because the word Granta means book, or the word Granta means knot. So Nagranta means without books or without knots. So Mahaprabhu just defines Nagranta as avidyahina, one who is without avidya, or one who is without the vidis. Vidis means like the prescriptions given in Shastra. They're called as vidis. So one who's without vidis or who's without avidya is called nirgranta. He says, according to context, you have to apply the meaning of the word. So the 7th type was called nirgranta muni. He is one who is without rules or one who is without avidya, because he's meditating on God, Krishna. He's called Nagranta Muni. So these are the 7 types. They are part of the Gyan mark. So now he begins a description of some few other types. I think there's 12. 6. Where the definition of the word Atmarama is taken according to followers of the path of yoga. So he's already mentioned this in his summary, that the word Atma, if taken to mean the absolute truth, has 3 manifestations. Although one, consciousness, it has 3 manifestations: Brahman, Paramatma, and Bhagavan, and there are 3 processes for realizing these 3 degrees of completion in the Lord. So the path of Gyan, you can realize Brahma. The path of yoga, you can realize Paramatma. Path of bhakti, you can realize Bhagavan. And of course, path of bhakti was divided into two types, Vaidhi and Raganuga. So he's giving explanation according to that sequence, having described adherence of the path of Gyan. Now he gives explanation of the word Atmarama in terms of adherence of the path of yoga. So this starts with verse number 54. 154, excuse me, the verse number 154. That's where I'm going to pick it up and do some gloss here, because then Maharaj was going to make a concluding statement that I'm going to read about a little bit. Okay, I think you can see this. So the yogi who worships the super soul within himself is also called Atmarama, Antaryami Upasaka Atmarama Kai. So there are two types of Atmarama yogis. Okay, what are the two types? Sagarbha and Nirgarbha, Haidhuipe. The two types of Atmarama yogis are called Sagarbha and Nigarbha. Each of these is divided into three. Therefore, there are 6 types of worshippers of the super soul. So Sagarbha and Nigarbha. We'll see how these get defined actually. So this verse is meant, the word Sagarbha, I think they will be defined. But the word Sagarbha basically means meditating on a form of Vishnu. That is the meaning of Sagarbha. And Nigarbha means without meditation on a form of the Lord. So I think Prabhupada would translate it later as some sort of impersonal meditation. Someone's going to ask, well, how is this different from the Brahmin guy? I don't know precisely. But yeah, Sargarbha means meditation on Vishnu, and Nirgarbha means not meditating on Vishnu. It basically corresponds to this 2 types of samadhi mentioned. If you go study Patanjali Yoga Sutra, there are 2 types of samadhis mentioned, Sapragyata Samadhi and Asampragyata Samadhi. So Sampragyata Samadhi means the samadhi that comes from concentration on an object known as an alambana. In the Yoga Sutra, you can basically select whatever alambana you want. And Patanjali gives a list. And first on that list is meditation on Ishvara, which he spends the most amount of sutras elaborating on. But then you can take other options also. Here, Sargarbha means meditation on Vishnu. So Sapragyata Samadhi, and they're related. And Asampragyata Samadhi means you're not taking any object as meditation. So it's kind of like impersonal. So that was the Nigarbha here. So there's 2 categories. They have 3 types each. So he gives some pramana for these 2 types. So this is a verse from the 2nd canto. Some yogis think of the Lord within their hearts as measuring about 6 inches. The Lord has 4 hands in which he holds a conch shell, club, disc, and lotus flower. Those who worship this form of Vishnu within the heart are called Sargarbha yogis. That last sentence is not exactly in there, but Prabhupada helping us out. This is a pramana for the first type. They worship or meditate on the form of Vishnu. That is their alambana for the meditation. Then the second verse, which is a very strange verse, offered as a pramana for the second type, Nigarbha yogi. When one is in ecstatic love with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So where the context of where this particular verse is appearing is Kapila Deva is talking about Ashtanga yoga system. So he talks about, up to this particular point in the verse, he's talking about those who perform Ashtanga yoga, obviously with some bhakti, and they realize the Supreme Lord and their minds remain concentrated on the Supreme Lord. Then he mentions another type who withdraws his mind from the Lord, even though he experiences the Lord, and the happiness of that experience is there also, but he gradually withdraws his mind away from the Lord. So this is taken as a Nigarbha a pramana for the Nigarbha yogi. Somehow he's withdrawing his mind from the form of the Lord, and I guess having some predilection from something more impersonal. So it says here, when one is in ecstatic love with the Supreme Lord, one's heart is melted by bhakti yoga and one feels transcendental bliss. There are bodily symptoms manifest, and due to eagerness, there are tears in the eyes. Thus, one is subjected to spiritual bliss. When the heart is overly afflicted, the meditative mind, like a fishing hook, is gradually separated from the object of meditation. So this word is coming api, which means although. And our commentator said this word api should be applied to all the previous sentences before. So it says about this yogi that Haro Bhagavati Pratilabdha Bhava. So he is attained bhava. That's what it says, Pratilabdha Bhava. So what is this bhava exactly here? I don't know if it is the same as the bhava that is related to Shuddha Bhakti. I think not. But he has attained Pratilabdha Bhava. He has attained Bhava for Bhagavati, for Bhagavan, Vishnu form. Haro, which is very attractive or attracting him. And how did he get that? Well, through his yoga, bhaktya, but specifically through the bhakti part of his yoga practice. And as a result of that, dravya hridaya utpulaka pramoda, his heart is in the process of melting. That's what the verse is saying. So the IP has to be applied here. So although he's attained bhava for Bhagavan, who's attractive, although through that bhakti part of his practice, his heart was melting, utpulaka pramoda. And it's, very pleasing and blissful. He was experiencing the happiness. Okanta bhashpakalaya. And although with great eagerness, he's experiencing the great eagerness and tears are coming from his eyes as a result of that eagerness. Mohur, constantly, like streams of tears are coming. Ardimanaha, and although he's merged in that happiness of this experience, so ta'api, although that is the case, chitta bhadisham, his heart is like a badisham, means like a fish hook. And so Shanakar Vinyukta, he gradually withdraws his mind away from that form. So anyway, I saw a commentary, Sri Vishwanath, it's very, very long to this particular verse. But Shanakar, gradually, he has to do it gradually because he's getting so much from that. As the verse is describing, so much happiness is also coming and tears are coming, ecstasies. So it's very difficult to draw his mind away from that. Why he draws his mind away, it's not clear. Forget how he is able to draw the mind away, I don't understand. Why he is drawing his mind away, Sri Vishwanath gives some comment there that it is because the experience of the Lord with form and the happiness that comes with that may somehow get translated to an attraction to material forms and the happiness experienced from material objects. This yogi is thinking like that in the commentary. Sri Vishwanath is making some statement. This really comes to show you, that according to your sambandha gyan, according to your understanding of reality, you will make some endeavor, and your conceptual orientation does have impact, how you approach, how you apply, and even impacts the subjective experience of life in general. But even in this more realized state, he's getting something from his practice, but still he's thinking, well, this rasa that I'm attracted to, rasa, I don't know if he says it like that, but the happiness that he's getting from experiencing the form of Lord, I may impose that onto the material objects and also get attracted. So he's gradually trying to draw his mind away from that into something more impersonal. And Chitta Badisham, so that's why it says mind is like a hook. So just like some fisherman is there, he'll throw the hook into the water with some food on top of it as bait for the fish. So this yogi he has a hook like heart, even though it's immersed in the experience of a form of the Lord, like the hook being immersed in the Ganga. He remains having some other desire, but he uses the bhakti as the bait, just like the fisherman throws some bait on the hook. So he puts some bhakti in front to attract the Lord. And although immersed in the Lord for a time period, like the hook is immersed in Ganga, he withdraws his mind. Saying like this here. So this verse is quoted as a pramana for the Nigarbha yogi. So although he's getting a meditation on Vishnu as part of his sadhana, he is withdrawing it, favoring something impersonal. So these are the two types of yogis, it seems. And so these two types, they each have three divisions called as Yoga Rurukshu, Yoga Ruda, and Prapti Siddhi. By these three divisions of advancement in yoga, Yoga Ruruksha, Yoga Aruda, and Prapti Siddhi, there are 6 kinds of mystic yogis. So the word Ruruksha means beginner, Aruda means adept, and Prapti Siddhi means like attainment of the sadhya of yoga. And 3 divisions are there. And next verse. So Mahaprabhu is quoting some verses from the Gita to show the first 2 types of Ruruksha and Aruda. This comes in the beginning of chapter 6 of Bhagavad Gita. I'll just read the verses here. For those saintly persons who wish to rise to the platform of yogic perfection, the means consist of practicing the yoga system by strictly following its regulative principles and practicing the yoga postures and breathing exercises. And for those who are already elevated to this platform, the means consist of maintaining mental equilibrium, shama, by rejecting all material activity and practicing meditation to keep the mind on the Supreme Lord. Well, this verse is appearing after Krishna spent basically 3 chapters describing karma yoga. So this Avaruksha yogi in the Gita, he is after this samadhi, but he's a beginner, Avaruksha. So he has to support his meditation practice, which is meditation practice means samadhi practice. He has to support that with following karma yoga because he's still not adept yet. But then, so therefore, following these different rules is his means because he's a beginner. But when he becomes aruda, when he becomes adept, then so much activity actually creates an obstacle to his meditation life. So ceasing such activities, karma yoga, varnashram, and all that, ceasing such activities becomes his means. Another distinction between Avaruksha and Aruda. There's another verse here about the Aruda yogi. When a person is no longer interested in sense gratification, yadahi na indriyarteshu na karmashu anushajite. He's no longer attached to the material activities for getting sense gratification. And when he renounces all material desires, sarva sankalpa sannyasi, all sankalpas have been renounced, then he is called as Yogaruda. Okay. So when a purified yogi associates with devotees, he engages in Lord Krishna devotional service, being attracted by the Lord's transcendental qualities. So if this yogi gets sadhu sangha, echa yogi sadhu sanghati hetupan. If he gets the sadhu sangha, then that sadhu sangha becomes the cause, hetu, of his attraction of Krishna and performance of Krishna bhajan. Krishna bhaja, Krishna guna, akrishnahan. That's what it's saying. So if this yoga rurukshu, yoga ruda person, I don't think he actually elaborates on the prapti siddhi at all. So I guess we'll just have to assume that they're thrown in there also. If they get sadhu sangha, then they get attracted to Krishna's qualities and they also do Krishna bhajan. Okay. So the meaning of the words chat, api can be applied here. The meanings of the word muni and their granta are the same as before. So earlier, because I just glossed over this earlier, but basically these words cha and pi, when Mahaprabhu says it's these 6 types of Gyan Margis, or now he's saying there's these 6 types of yogis, the word, there's only one word to represent all of them. That word is Atmarama. So if you just read the shloka from Bhagavatam, Atmarama Shamuneyo, then just by looking at that, it doesn't seem like it's talking about so many people. All right. Already Mahaprabhu has given us what, 7 meetings for Gyan Margis. He's given us 6 meetings here for Yoga Margis. But if you look at the verse, it just looks like one person, Amarama, is being discussed. How are you getting so many numbers out of that one word? So he quotes some sutra from Sanskrit grammar saying how the word cha, by adding the word cha at the end of a word, at the end of a series of words that have the same meaning and conjugation, then it can indicate that particular number. So anyway, the words cha and ip, he's saying here the words cha and ip should be applied as before to say that yes, there are these 6 types of yogis, even though there's only one word to represent all of them. And the words muni and their granta are the same as before. Again, meaning someone who's without ignorance or without following rules, because they concentrate on Krishna. So these yogis, like the Gyanis before them, if they get sadhu sangha, that becomes a cause of attraction to Krishna's qualities and the performance of his worship. Okay, the word ahaituki. So the word ahaituki means without motive. And we heard Mahaprabhu in his summation of the verse said, without motive means without the motive of bhukti, mukti, and siddhi. These, I guess, these are the 3 categories of motives. Desire for sense gratification, desire for the 18 mystic perfections, or desire for the 5 types of mukti. So ahaituki means without these motives. The word ahaituki is always applicable to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Urukrama. So in this way, I've described 13 meanings of the Atmarama verse. So the 7 Gyan Margis and 6 Yog Margis here. And Prabhupada's purport, he gives the full list here. Again, Mahaprabhu didn't, the last 2 categories of yogis, the Prapta Siddhi. So you'll see here, Sargara Prapta Siddhi or Nigara Prapta Siddhi. Mahaprabhu didn't really mention anything about that, but I guess we are to assume that they also get sadhu sangha and they also become attracted to Krishna's qualities. All right, now the next statement is the one that's kind of interesting for me. Mahaprabhu says that these 13 types of yogis and munis are called Shanta Bhaktas, for they render transcendental, loving service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead in the neutral stage. So basically, these first 13 explanations of the Atmarama Shamunaya verse is in terms of Shanta Bhakti. So this is going to be indicated that he will give other explanations according to Dasya Bhakti, and the other types of ratis are there. So this first explanations, 13 meanings are there according to Shanta Bhakti. So that's why it's hard to tell. They're called as bhaktas because they concentrate on the Lord. But their attraction to the Lord is in neutrality. So what exactly does that mean? So I pulled up Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu Bindu so we can get a little bit of discussion. I also was looking at BRS and some of the other commentaries there, but it's a big topic, long topic. But get a little sense of the Shanta Bhakti Rasa. So that's one of the rasas discussed by Srila Rupa Goswami. So we read a little bit here and get a sense of these types that we're hearing about here, which is interesting. So it says here in the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, I think you can still see my screen. Shanta Bhakti Rasa is defined the following way. If Shanta Rati Sthai Bhav mixes with the elements of Vibhava, Anubhav, Satvika Bhav, and Vyabhichari Bhav. I hope you remember these terms. We've covered them and discussing, I think I'm discussing Prayojan Tattva of Mahaprabhu's teachings. So these terms should be understood, hopefully. So when Shantarati mixes with the elements of Vibhav, Anubhav, Satvika Bhav, Vyapichari Bhav that are appropriate for Shantarasa and becomes very tasteful in the hearts of devotees who are predominated by Shama or equanimity, it is called Shanta Bhakti Rasa by the learned. Okay. So who is the Vibhava? You know, this word Vibhava means the cause of the act. You can say the cause of the activation of the love. So love gets activated when there's a subject and object of love, right? So the object of love is Krishna, and in Bhakti Rasa, and the subject of love is the different types of devotees who love Krishna, right? And different ratis. So, but the Vishaya Lambana is Krishna, but which Krishna is precisely? So every lover has their Ishtadev, right? The deity of their heart. So who specifically is the Vishaya Alambana of Shantar Rasa? So that has been described here. The Vishaya Alambana of Shantar Rasa, Sri Krishna manifested as a personification of eternity, cognizance, and bliss. The pinnacle of those who take pleasure in the self, Atmaramas, Parabrahma with human-like appearance, four-handed Narayana, and Paramatma. So the qualities he exhibits are as follows. The quality he, Krishna, or the Vishaya Lambana, which may be any of these pictures. Actually, the Vishaya Lambana is not Krishna directly with two hands necessarily, but four-handed, his four-handed human-like form, or four-handed Narayana form, or Paramatma form, or even Brahman from the commentaries on this verses. So that those forms of Krishna that he exhibits is peaceful. He endures even intolerable distress. He is free from all sins, and he purifies others of sins. He is in full control of his senses. He is never controlled by the dictates of Maya. He bestows mukti on the enemies killed by him, and he is omnipresent. So these are the qualities that these sorts of bhaktas appreciate and their Ishtadev. So who are these subjects of love in this relationship? So they're the Shanta Bhaktas, those whose rati is predominated by Shama, equanimity, are the shelter, Ashraya Alambana of Shanta Rasa. The Shanta Bhaktas are of two types, Atmarama, those who take pleasure in the self, and Tapasvigana, those who undertake austerities with faith and bhakti. So I think you can see, or we can intuit that Mahaprabhu's explanations is an expansion of the ideas here about the subjects of love and Shantarasa. So the Atmarama is taken here as the impersonalists on Gammark, and the Tapasvigana, like yogis who underdo austerities with faith and bhakti. So some examples here. The Atmarama person, Sanaka, Sanandana, Sanatana, and Sanakumar, who are devoid of mamata, or a sense of possessiveness for the Lord, right? Like in other forms of bhakti, there's a sense that God is mine. So this Shanta Bhaktas, they don't have that. Who are firmly focused on the Supreme Lord, Bhagavan Nishta, and who propound the path of bhakti, are prominent among the Atmarama Shanta Bhaktas. Those who adopt Yuta Vairagya and practice Bhagavat Bhajan, knowing that without bhakti, liberation cannot be obtained, are called Tapasa Shanta Bhaktas. Such persons have faith in bhakti only as a process for attaining liberation. Okay, as long as they take up the limbs of bhakti with a desire for mukti, Shantarati, which is the basis of Shantarasa, cannot appear in their hearts. If such Gyanis give up the desire for liberation, then by the mercy of the devotees of Sri Krishna, Bhakti, or in other words, Shantarati appears in their hearts. At that time, they also may become the Ashraya Alambana of Shantarasa. So, Srila Narayan Maharaj, I think he gives a note about this, which I found to be very helpful when looking at this. He said, it may be noted that if someone is a recipient of Nanda Nandana Sri Krishna's special mercy, then even if he was previously fixed in Gyan, he attains a super excellent quality of Rati that far exceeds that of Shantarati. When his Gyan samskara is slackened, he may even become expert in relishing the bliss of Bhakti Rasa, as was the case with Sri Shukadev Muni, right? This is exemplified in the statement of Sri Bhavamangala Thakur, which we also heard yesterday. Formerly, I was an object of worship for those who traverse the path of monism. The advocates of the path of impersonal Brahma Gyan used to worship me, thinking me to be very great. Being seated on the throne of Brahmananda realization, I used to receive their adoration. But some cunning ravisher of the young wives of the cowherds, Gopi Janavallabha, Nandanandana Sri Krishna, has forcibly made me his maidservant. It is evident from this that by the uncommon mercy of Sri Shamasundar, those who attain a glimpse of the splendor of his charming lotus feet, even those established in Brahman realization, forget all their deficiencies. They then repent their previous condition and engage in bhakti. So, yeah, because this question kept appearing about, well, who attains Brahman? Because you either fall down or you get attracted to Krishna's qualities. It seems here that these Shanta Bhaktas, they are attracted to Krishna's qualities and they do perform Krishna bhajan. But not in all cases do they become attracted to a personal goal and divinity. When they do become attracted to a personal goal and transcendence, it is due to sadhu sangha or extraordinary mercy of Bhagavan, and in certain cases also the extraordinary nature of bhakti. But otherwise, they all get attracted to the qualities of Krishna and perform Krishna bhajan, and become steady in their respective levels of awareness because of meditation on Krishna. But I guess only some of them by sangha of sadhus and sangha of or the nature of bhakti and extraordinary mercy of Krishna, they get attraction to a personal idea and transcendence. Otherwise, they're not opposed to Brahman realization. I just one other thing I'll read here about this Shantarasa, and this is from Jiva Goswami in the same verse talking about these Shanta Bhaktas. He says here, this is a verse from Rupa Goswami's verse. He said, generally, these practitioners possess the happiness of impersonal Brahman, realizing it as the cause of everything. However, such impersonal happiness is dilute, whereas the happiness related to the Lord with form and qualities is intense. And Jiva Goswami comments here that the swasukha jatiyam sukha means the happiness of Brahman without qualities, which is the source of everything. Though these persons sometimes realize the qualities of the Lord, generally, they prefer the aspect without qualities. So that was a comment that stood out to me also. Though these persons sometimes realize the qualities of the Lord, generally, they prefer the aspect without qualities. This is indicated in the Atmarama verse in the Bhagavatam, which is what we're reading about. So, some people like impersonal realization. So Athena was asking that yesterday. Well, who attains Brahman? I said, someone gets it. And it's clear here. Well, I don't say it's clear, but definitely seems here from Jiva Goswami's comment that they generally remain attracted, even if they are performing Krishna bhajan and are attracted to Krishna's qualities, because that keeps them in their steadiness and their awareness. Similarly, like what Krishna is talking about in Gita when he first mentions himself. A person who wants the higher taste, well, they have to control their senses. But in order to control your senses, you need a higher taste. So this is called the fault of mutual dependence. So we call it as catch-22. So what's the solution to this? So Krishna says, well, they control their senses, but to keep them controlled, they have to meditate on me. And that keeps them, in their standard of awareness by that Krishna meditation, which we can essentially just call that as Krishna bhajan. But sometimes they remain attracted to impersonal goals and transcendence, even though also attracted and performing Krishna bhajan. And if they get extraordinary mercy, especially of sadhus, then they may give up those goals and get some attraction to some sort of personal liberation. Okay, so I'm going to pause there. Mahaprabhu saying these 13 types that he's describing here are Shanta Bhaktas. So we have to read up a lot more detail about these Shanta Bhaktas to get the full sense of these first 13 explanations of the verse. I admittedly don't fully get Shanta Bhakti because I can't tell what the distinction, but the how they are bhaktas is still subtle to me. They are bhaktas because they concentrate on the Lord. And that is also the meaning of the word shama, because it keeps saying those who are qualified by shama. This word shama means equanimity of mind or equalness. So there, Krishna has a verse in the 11th canto. Shama means concentration on him. So they are called as bhaktas because they concentrate on him. But it's not clear to me if they ever lose sight of their goals, even though they concentrate on Krishna. They may still have other goals and transcendence. So it's a little subtle to me. And maybe this is why, we've often mentioned, I only first heard this from Srila Gaura Govinda Maharaj, that Krishna Mahaprabhu came to distribute the four rasas, Dasya, Sakya, Vatsalya, Madhurya. He did not come to distribute Shanta Bhakti. This is following a statement of Kaviraj Goswami in the 3rd chapter, where it says clearly that Krishna came as Mahaprabhu to distribute four rasas, not this 5th one. So it's still, I'm not clear how Shanta Bhakti, is exactly Bhakti, except for the fact that they do concentrate on the Lord. There is attraction to him and his bhajan, but maybe not always enough to abnegate their impersonal goals and transcendence. So we would have to study that section of BRS carefully to really get a sense of these first 13 explanations of the Atmarama verse, which is applying to them, honestly. But at least we can say there are 13 types of Atmaramas Mahaprabhu is described, and he has called them as Shanta Bhaktas. So if we understand Shanta Bhakti, then we'll get some insight to these different 13 types, or whatever that's worth. So we're going to pause here. See here. 24,157 refers to Rati Abhas. Hold on. Why is that? 24,157. Why does refers to Rati Abhas. You've heard this from somewhere. I'm looking at it now. Evam Haro Bhagavati Pratilabdha Bhava. So you're saying the Pratilabdha Bhava here is Rati Abhasa. BRS 1341. If symptoms of Rati are observed in people while having desires for liberation, then these symptoms resemble Rati semblance or show. Commentary to Bhagavatam Dharvanashe. Yeah. This is from BRS. So yeah, maybe this Bhava is Rati Abbas, Bhava Abbas. Nice. Interesting. Sham Saki, nice pramana, Tamir. So the devotees who are in Shantarasa in spiritual world, Goloka Vrindavan. So who is in Shantarasa in spiritual world?
Hare Krishna, wouldn't it be like the flowers and those who are just admiring Krishna?
Who is that? Who said cows are in Shantarasa, trees and rocks? Who said like that? I know this is common. This is common lore, and it's common, but I've never seen that these entities are described as in Shantarasa. For example, the cows, you're mentioning cows. I've heard they're in Vatsalya Rasa. They have motherly affection towards Krishna. You hear the clouds, they have friendship relationship to Krishna. There are one shlokas there in 10th canto. The sun was very intense, and the clouds, they got in front of the sun to add like an umbrella for Krishna because Krishna was their friend. So I'm not 100% sure how the Shantarasa is there and Braja. So if you can look that up, find some nice commentary or something on that. I know that is common lore that these are in Shantarasa, but I don't know if that is the case. So I'm questioning that premise. So why are they in Goloka? So yeah, all these other questions only make sense if your premise is correct, but we don't know if your premise is correct. So we have to, yeah, let's ask around. Everyone who said that, so you find out from where you were coming out with that conclusion that they're in Shantarasa. So if you go and study the Shanta Bhakti Rasa chapter at BRS, they're not making any mention of any entities in Braja being in Shanta Bhakti. They're talking about like yogis and munis and Atmaramas. So we have to question the assumptions there.
Hare
Okay.
Krishna, Chuchu.
Tamir says 3:28, 34 to 35 says, who attains Brahman? Yeah, so you're talking about the same verse with the Evam Haro Bhagavati Pratilapta Bhava. Says that they attain Brahman. Yes, anyway, in that case, that is why Mahaprabhu was quoting that verse as an example of a Nigarba yogi, right? He used that verse as a pramana for that type of yogi. So it's impersonal. He doesn't meditate on Vishnu. So I guess it works there.
Yes, Prabhu. And also regarding this Shanta, like Rati, we are having that understanding that, as you mentioned, the cows are in Vatsalya Ras and the clouds are in Sakhya Ras. But then I think we had one class with Hari Parshad Prabhu where he says that this is Madhavendra Puri, it is like his realization. So it is like from the, like when you look it from the vision of a poet, so that's what it is.
If you look at the vision of the poet,
Yeah.
these different creatures of Braja are in different rasas. That's what you're saying.
Yeah, like that's what he mentioned. So we have to ask him that Praman.
So then, do they have no love for Krishna or they have love for Krishna?
Yeah, I mean Shanta also is like will be in the prema, right? If they are experiencing rasa.
So you're okay. So what poet has presented their love as a type of Shanta?
Yeah, I think that we have to ask him.
Yeah, because then that can also just be a poetic. So then the question comes: what type of love do they have for real? So anyway, a very interesting thing.
Yes.
But then this we take the premise that they have Shantarasa. Then all these questions the twins were asking.
Right. So I think Hari Parshad Prabhu also takes that premise that they have Shanta rasa.
That they have Shantaras.
Yeah.
Then all these questions come how they're in Brahman, because here it says Shantarasa, they meditate on Vishnu's form. So why are they in Goloka? Right. Or is this Shantarasa section is not found in devotees in Goloka? And then all these kind of questions come up.
Right. Yeah, we have to ask him the premise.
So yeah, to clarify that. Okay, Adina has some question.
Haribo Dandavats. Well, I had this same question, and I'm when you're asking for the pramana, I'm sorry, I'm just doing a quick search just online, and I nothing's coming up from say specific database or anything, but when you just say call the 5 rasas with Krishna, it lists the Shanta ras, but could you also assume that again, it's saying with Krishna, and Krishna is in Dwarka and Goloka. So therefore, it's not like it's saying 5 rasas with Paramatma, or 5 rasas with Brahman. It's specifically with Krishna. And so couldn't you assume that the Shantaras also shows up in Goloka, given that that's in one sense a primary residence of Krishna, so it thus exists in Goloka?
What is your question?
I had the same thing, a question as the twins, because here the Shantarasa seemed like it was within the Gan Marg, which we've always heard Shantarasa was always, I guess,
Well,
one of the
your question is taking the assumption that these different creatures are in Shantarasa also.
Well, the question is how does Shantarasa exist in Goloka Vrindavan, and maybe there's certain references that other more well-read devotees can pull up of how it does exist, because they're the 5 primary rasas, there's 7 secondary rasas related to Krishna, and Krishna exists in Goloka Vrindavan. So how could it not exist? Shantarasa not exist in Goloka?
Yeah, maybe, but how it is existing there, I don't know. So I cannot say how the Shantarasas exist there. And Krishna doesn't come to distribute it. It seems, at least in the vision of Kaviraj Goswami, Krishna doesn't come to distribute the Shantarasa. So if it is existing there, how is it existing exactly? I cannot say. I'm not sure.
So perhaps you can ask, so say a flower in Goloka Vrindavan, how is it in active service then? Because the 4 other from Dasya, I say onwards, there's an active
the flower
service.
gives fragrance, right? That is service. So that's why I'm saying these things are very abstract, and you're going to take from so many different angles. So we would have to get clarity and see if any Shastra Pramanas there, some acharyas give some more clarity about that. Otherwise, it's very abstract. So it's all, so many possibilities are there. Perhaps Shantarasa is possible, but you can say Dasarasa also. Flowers give fragrance. Trees serve in so many different ways. Krishna even glorifies them at the end of chapter 22 of the 10th canto. And the trees are indicated as better servants than the 4 the brahmanas from whom they asked the foodstuffs in the next chapter. So it's a little abstract.
Just to push a little bit on this point, but I know we're maybe applying our understanding of what service is when we say active service. But if you were to say, well, a flower is giving fragrance, and say a tree is giving shade, that's service. But that's service from just their being. There's maybe not an active sense of
anyway. So
like
yeah, we will use all these language. That's why I'm saying it's not clear. So we would have to find out some acharya commentary at least, or some Shastra Pramana, because it's very abstract. So if it is Shanta Bhakti Rasa is there, how it is there, that's why I'm saying I don't know. So we have to find out if it is there, how it exists there. So your logic here is, I think, good. Like Krishna is the shelter of all the rasas. So how is the Shanta rasa existing in relationship to him in his own domain? So that we're saying we don't know. So the use of any word like active here, well, I don't know if I consider that active. That doesn't have any meaning here because we don't know.
Thank you. Just to wrap up on that point, my comparison was when we were saying that when the jiva exists in the Brahmajyoti, they're just normal being of illuminating the spiritual sky is service, but we don't categorize that as active. So I was saying your normal being, for example, the jiva is light and it's illuminating the sky. They're not actively doing anything. They're just being, and that's service. Similarly, the flower, the tree, they're not actively doing anything. They're just being, and that's service. So, so it just seems that they would be in Shanta. But understood that again.
It doesn't seem like anything to me because, like I said, unless we understand how Shanta Rasa is existing in these personal domains, it doesn't seem like anything. We're just extrapolating from some English words that we have in our head and, trying to think of something. So we need something a little bit more direct to work with. So it becomes a little bit more crystallized. It doesn't seem like anything to me. Like whatever you just said doesn't seem like anything to me, because I already said I don't know how the Shantarasa is existing in the spiritual domain.
Thank you. I know there are chats in the chat box around this, but quickly. So today, what we read basically establishes Shanta Ras or Shanta Bhakti to be within the Gyan marg. Is that correct?
No, the other way. So these Gyan Margis and Yoga Margis, when Mahaprabhu describes, he says are in Shanta Bhaktis.
Okay. Thank you. I have other questions. I don't know if you want to address those in the chat box.
They're just sharing some shloka. Is this from BRS? It is the nature of Shantarasa that not even the smallest intimacy exists. Rather, knowledge of impersonal Brahma and localized Paramatma is prominent. Srila Prabhupada's purport, because of an impersonal impression of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, a devotee in the Shantarasa relationship worships the impersonal Brahman or localized aspect of the absolute truth, Paramatma. He does not develop a personal relationship with the Supreme Personality of God, Shri Krishna. Madhya 9 to 18, no intimacy in Shantarasa, only understanding of Brahman and Paramatma is prominent, so they can't be in Goloka. Yeah, maybe. I don't. That may not be Siddhanta though. Now Tamir is offering some statement that Hari Prasad is also taking these some of these creatures in Goloka to be in Shantarasa. So it looks like some investigation work is required with this subject matter. If they're in Shantarasa, how is that they're in Shantarasa? Mahaprabhu is describing, Srila Rupa Goswami is describing that this generally refers to persons who have an attraction to some impersonal feature of the Lord, or else the Paramatma, some Vishnu feature of the Lord. So how is it existing in Goloka? That is not clear. Of course, that will only be supremely important for those who are interested in developing that possibility. But out of matter of curiosity, we may want to know also. So we have to do some research here.
I really love what Shamgopi sent, because it's basically saying the Shanta Ras is worship of the impersonal Brahman or localized Paramatma. So it's very interesting. Thank you for sharing that. I guess, sorry, to continue, I was curious because when you were saying that this whole catch-22 where a yogi needs to develop higher taste, or one needs to curb his senses, but also develop a higher taste. And so in order to continue to curb your senses, one must develop a higher taste. But once they develop that taste, it sounds like they detract to keep in that awareness. So they're not.
They detract. What does that mean?
Or they withdraw from that higher taste in the Supreme Lord.
No. So those verses from Gita, we were explaining. The verses from Gita just explained that in order to remain situated in sense control, then you need to worship Vishnu. So that those set of verses are appearing in reply to the question, how does the yogi sit? How is it he can keep his senses from running out towards the external world for sense gratification? It's very difficult. So basically, Krishna wants to say it's because he has a higher taste. But then the question is coming, to get higher taste, you need to control your senses. But you're saying to control your senses, you need a higher taste. So how does that work? So Krishna is saying you start with controlling the senses, but to keep them inside, that is the hard part. So for that, you have to meditate on me. That is 261. And then by 268, he says such a person is able to remain so situated because he meditates on me. So that's all we were mentioning there. That is the meditation on Krishna that allows them to control themselves. It allows them to come to a higher taste and allows them to stay in that higher space. That is how Krishna is presenting himself in the Gita in the beginning.
So one needs to continuously always meditate on him to stay. It's not that basically I'm just clarifying.
That's what we always say, right? All these processes have some element of bhakti in it. So that means some connection to God, right? some chanting, some deity puja, something.
Right. So to stay in that awareness, they always have to continuously meditate on
that's
Krishna.
what Krishna is saying.
Okay.
You have to stay situated. You have to do some bhakti has to be there. And those who don't do the bhakti, that's what we heard yesterday, then they can fall down because it's the bhakti that is giving them support.
Thank you. Maybe this will be covered in the next session about the Nigarbhas. And basically it's the impersonal meditation. But I thought the one argument is that one cannot actually meditate on the impersonal. It's impossible.
Krishna doesn't say that. He says it's very difficult for the embodied souls to do that. But they can do it in due course of time, gradually, with great pain and tapasya. So this is verses, chapter Gita, chapter 12. Verse 5 is where he says it. Also 3 through 4 also says. He said eventually they also come to the mark, but it's with great difficulty and pain.
Thank you. It's hard for us to conceptualize it because I guess our focus has always been on the personal form, but understood. So it is possible, just very difficult. But still with that, one can meditate on the impersonal, although it's very difficult, but one can never become a devotee of the impersonal. Correct?
Yeah. I mean, yes. I guess someone could say they're devoted to impersonal realization. But yeah, devotee and devotee means service to Bhagavan. So in that sense, they're not going to be devotees.
Okay. And right. And then you would never be devotees to Paramatma. So devotees only to Bhagavan, which is the highest realization, the personal. Thank you. And then lastly,
I would like to say there, Paramatma is also Bhagavan. So it's Bhagavan that relates to the material energy, but he is also Bhagavan. He is described as such in Shastra. He's the Bhagavan that relates to the material world. So he gets this name Paramatma or Purusha.
But how do you render service or become a devotee of Paramatma? What does that look like?
Meditation. Meditation is also seva, right? Smarna. Vishnu Smarna. So the Smarna is also bhakti. Srila Bhakti Siddhanta, he was having health problems, getting ready to leave his body. And he said if he has to do bhakti simply by meditating on Krishna, then he was prepared to do that also. If he couldn't speak or his body couldn't move. So that is also seva. Prahlad Maharaj is the Acharya of Smarna Bhakti.
But couldn't then you argue that Smarna meditation on the impersonal aspect, because it's all Krishna, it's just which aspect is also devotion then, or it's also service?
Argue that anything can be argued after all. There's no
but
problem.
Do we accept that then if you take that route, that Smarna on the impersonal aspect of the Lord is remembrance and therefore service, and therefore one can be a devotee of? Is that even a proper extrapolation?
With logic, it could be accepted. It is okay. There is no problem. We don't accept that as Siddhanta. But we actually have no beef. If someone wants to are attracted to the impersonal feature of Krishna, it is, after all, the impersonal feature of Krishna, and they do certain sadhanas for that, okay, that is also there. No problem. If someone says, well, I'm devoted to that, okay, no problem. Why we should argue with that?
I'm so sorry. When you say it's not Siddhanta, though, what do you mean?
I said, I don't know if we accept. That's not conclusion. It's not like the highest truth or the highest reality worth pursuing. But if someone is saying that, hey, Brahman is the impersonal feature of Krishna, and I'm devoted to that, I don't think we would have any argument with that. So yeah, that is also okay.
Okay, but when you say devoted there, you mean attracted, whereas when we say devotee, it means providing service or rendering service.
They're also doing, right? They say, hey, I'm chanting Hare Krishna too. I want to attain Brahman because I'm devoted to that. So that is also okay.
Thank you. And then I'm just kind of rewinding back. In the very beginning of class, I know this section was talking about Atmarama, which is stay satisfied in the self. And you mentioned first that Amma means absolute truth, and absolute truth meaning Brahman, Paramatma, and Bhagavan. And then you brought in the term consciousness. And I know we've talked a little bit about consciousness, in which, depending on context, can mean different things. So consciousness could mean the soul. Consciousness could be awareness. But I'm sorry, this might sound like a really elementary question, but then when, only because I saw is interesting. Of course, this was obviously not Tattva, but there was this chart, there was these bhakti yogis who were talking about Ayurveda, and they're talking about the different bodies, and they put consciousness in the subtle body. So mind, intelligence, ego, and consciousness, because their argument was you must purify the consciousness. So it's something that you.
I don't. What is that? Where was this at?
I know it's incorrect, but it just got me thinking.
Where was it at?
It was actually on Bhakti Center, and it was those running the Ayurveda. It was like kind of like an intro to.
They're explaining Ayurveda. Who knows how they're using the terms? There could be the word chitta sometimes is also translated as consciousness or heart. It gets all sorts of translations because it's a very hard word to actually translate into English. And different schemas of schools use that word chitta very differently. So the word chitta is not, which is sometimes also translated as consciousness. Like when we say cheto darpana marjanam, cleaning the mirror of the heart or cleaning the mirror of consciousness, it means cleaning the mirror of the chitta, which is covered by the ahankar element. So before the ahankar element, there's the mahatattva element. So that's matter, right? And the localized mahatattva element is called chitta. And it's very hard. I think, one way it gets translated is universal intellect, the mahatattva. And then it is localized, it's called chitta, which, I've seen it translated as consciousness also. And so that chitta has to be purified. So that chitta then is part of the subtle body because it's not spiritual. That consciousness, the way they're translating it there, consciousness is part of the subtle body. That's why it gets confusing when you translate terms into the English.
Thank you. But if pretend we are not in the schema of the Raja Yuga, and we're talking about just in normal everyday terms, when we're saying we must purify the consciousness. But how do you define that then when even Bhakti say we must purify our consciousness and we must purify our consciousness?
Well,
what does that mean?
Purify means you can say because the soul is turned away from God, it is impure. Actually, the jiva is always pure. It's always in its ontological position. It can never be impure. So you have to say how they're using the word purity and impurity here. So someone may say if the soul is oblivious of God, it is impure. And that impurity there is specifically talking about not being aware of Bhagavan. So he's called as impure. But not like there's some tincture in the consciousness itself or the soul itself. There's some like contamination that has to be removed. But it's just talking about the non-awareness of God. He's called as impure there. So yeah, that's why I said it's very hard. The communication gets very challenging sometimes. Because then you have to say, well, what do you mean by impurity here? So do you mean that there's something like in the soul, like, when the body gets impure, like stool on the body somewhere, it's impure. So is it impure like that? Or what do you mean by impurity here? Because I thought the soul was always pure and it's always in its nature. And so you can ask.
Right. I think that's where I was.
If there's some confusion, you just ask how the speaker is using the word there.
Thank you. But in your example that you gave, essentially you're saying when one typically say when we hear purify the consciousness, we must purify our consciousness. It's not that there's something of material matter that we need to purify. It's just used in the context that the soul has turned away from God, we're forgetful of God, so we must purify the aspect to bring it into its purity and remembering.
You turn towards God. Yeah, you remember him. You chant his glories. So whenever you're in any position in the material world, good or bad, pious or impious, both are called as impure. Why? Because of non-awareness of God. Then no matter what your position is, if you turn towards God, then you come to, quote, purity, like Vritrasura and demon body fighting Devatas, but he's pure because he's remembering Bhagavan. So the word purity and purity used a little bit different there. So you have to ask how the speaker using these words.
Thank you. And then in Hatha Pratitikpa, when the chitta, the one you were talking about with Mahatattva, that is material and that saturated, but that includes the ahankar, the false ego. Is that correct? And that's why, in that sense, it is something part of the subtle body that we purify.
Yeah, it's material, right? Mahatattva is material.
Right. And but Mahatattva includes it includes the false ego. So they're saying purify the false ego.
Includes the false ego. I mean, the chitta is covered by false ego. You can say it's inclusive of prakriti. So first there's prakriti or pradhan, and then when it starts to unfold to become the universe, first element is called mahatattva. Then after that, the ahankar comes in 3 divisions. And then ahankar and goodness, comes manas and the devatas, and ahankar and this comes that, and the ahankar and ignorance comes the other thing. So you can say they're all included within the category of prakriti. These are like divisions of nature. And chitta is one of those divisions.
Thank you so very much. Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. Yeah, I know it's late. Can I just share one?
Please.
I was looking for it. So this
You
is
found
from.
it?
No, not that sloka, but this is from chapter 32 of Bhakti Rasamrit Sindhu, like basically from the Waves of Devotion book, and this is what I was looking for. So generally, when we talk about Shantarati, like it is a part of Shuddharati, and apart from Shantarati, like there is another thing called Swachharati, which says that
Yes.
Swachharati occurs in a devotee who does not yet possess any specific affection for Krishna, but who
Yes.
sometimes reflects the affections of various devotees, like a transparent crystal reflects the color of any object placed in his proximity. And Srila Prabhupada explains their symptoms are manifested transparently, just like jewels. And then the example is given that it is said that a great devotee Brahmana would sometimes address the Supreme Personality of Godhead as Master, and sometimes joke with the Lord using different kinds of familiar words. Sometimes he would protect the Lord with a filial affection. Sometimes he would cry out to the Lord, addressing the Lord as his beloved, and sometimes he would meditate on the Lord as the super soul. So yeah, so this devotee, he has like all. Sometimes he will have this affection. Sometimes he will have like that rati. So
Yeah. So this comes up in Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu Bindu also, or BRS also, it's be there. So these Swacha and what was the other category called again?
that samanya rati, swachha rati, and
Samanya rati, like generic, and Swacha, this sort of like random. So those types of ratis, they don't become rasa. They never become rasa. But the Shantarati can come up to the stage of rasa. So there's some distinction there.
okay. So it doesn't mean that this swachha rati person can go to Goloka then.
Right. So that is mentioned in the notes, and that is mentioned by Sri Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur in the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu Bindu. So that is the distinction between Shantarati and these other 2 categories. So that's why I said, actually, to get an appreciation for these 13 explanations that we just heard from Mahaprabhu, you have to study that part a little carefully, which I haven't done. So it's a little subtle to me how Shanta Bhakti is like precisely.
Yes, so thank you for the clarification. Hare Krishna.
The twins have shared some link on some discussion about Shanta Rasa, and then they said they don't know if it's bona fide. Thank you for giving us permission to take a risk. Okay, maybe we pause there for today then. And I'm sure so many queries have been piqued. So one can do the research and bring your findings to the investigation, to the group, the findings of your investigation to the group. Okay, Hari Om Tat Sat. We'll try to continue tomorrow.